All right, looks like we have about everybody here. It's 6:30. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Champaign County Board Committee of the Whole. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Goss,
Here.
Harper,
Here.
Humphrey,
Here.
King,
Here.
Lokshin,
Here.
McGuire, Michaels,
Here.
Pasalakwa,
Here.
Paul, Rodriguez,
Here.
Storr,
Present.
Straub,
Here.
Summers,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Thorsland,
Here.
Wolken,
Here.
Ammons,
Here.
Cowart,
Present.
Esri,
Here.
Furtado,
Here.
Patterson.
Here, and it looks like Jim McGuire's in the meeting.
Mr. McGuire, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, could I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved. Taylor.
Second, Straub.
All right, is there any suggestions for amending the agenda? Does anybody have any questions? All right, seeing none, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lokshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes. Could I have a motion for the approval of the March 9th, 2021 regular meeting, approval of the minutes?
So moved, Goss.
I just wanted to point out my name is missing in the minutes from the March 9th meeting. I was present via Zoom.
Second, Thorsland, while we're at it.
All right, Megan, are we able to take care of that, or do we need to amend the minutes?
We can just, if it's okay to make a motion to approve them with that amendment, I can get that added before posting. I'm sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, seems like the most convenient way to do it. Is there any other discussion or alterations? All right, seeing none, could you call the roll for the approval of the minutes with the addition?
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lokshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes, and it looks like Jacob Paul is present.
Yeah, I got late. I got terrible service though.
All right, next is public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? See, James Tinsley.
Yes. Hello, all. Good to be here. Can I go now? All right. It's kind of weird being on this side. I was actually waiting on my name to be called during the roll call. I just wanted to touch base with you guys this evening on tonight's resolution in regards to honoring Mr. Lloyd Carter. Some of you may know that his service to this county and this board speaks for itself with him servicing us for 24 years. I was fortunate enough to replace him, and before his passing, I've known him since I was a young child living on Fairview. But as I got older and we got to actually talk about issues here in District 11, I gained a high respect for him, other than what I already had. That being said, I just want you to take tonight's resolution in consideration and pay homage to a man who serviced this community for a very long time. And, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you all, and I miss you much.
Thank you, Mr. Tinsley. Next, I have Shane Gilbert.
You need to unmute yourself.
It looks like Mr. Gilbert might be having trouble unmuting themselves. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could move on to the next speaker, like Jenny Putnam, and then we can come back to see if we're able to figure out the situation. And Ms. Putnam, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, what an honor. What an honor to follow Mr. Tinsley, also speaking in favor of the resolution that would name the county board meeting room in honor of Mr. Lloyd Carter Jr. This is a matter that was dear to the heart of fellow county board member Stan Summers. And the first time Stan spoke with me about this, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago, I was outside raking leaves and he came up and floated the notion. And I said, that's brilliant. Steve, that's brilliant. Wow, that is a beautiful idea. I want to get on board with that. That's outstanding. I didn't speak at the time and the measure did not pass. And I'm so glad that Mr. Summers has continued with the resolution and is bringing it forward a second time. I wish that all of you could have known Lloyd the way others of us have known Lloyd. Like if you ever brought your Urbana High School grandson to play baseball and sat in the stands with Lloyd, there watching his UHS grandson playing baseball. Or if you ever were near Lloyd at a barbecue grill and stood with he would have his apron on and he'd be turning your brat or your ribs just the way you wanted it. I wish everyone could have known Lloyd the way people, his family and friends got to know him. But in any event, the residents of Urbana, who he represented on the Urbana City Council for 6 years, knew him, and anyone in county government knew Lloyd for 35 years. And it's altogether fitting to name Mr. Carter and to rename the meeting room one the Shields Carter meeting room. I was talking today to my running mate, seatmate, Tom Betts, and Tom was talking about how much Mr. Shields liked Lloyd. They'd been at a NACO meeting together, and Mr. Shields told Tom about a time when Lloyd was having trouble collecting on charges due him or payment due him for work that his electrical company had performed. And he just wasn't getting anywhere. But Mr. Shields said, let me help you with it. And Mr. Shields on his own traveled to Rantoul to help Mr. Carter work out the billing issue. And that's just a sign of how much the two men respected each other and enjoyed one another. And I think it would be an honor to Mr. Shields and to Mr. Carter to rename the room for the Shields Carter room. Not very many people have the honor of having a room named for herself or himself. It's an honor beyond dimension, beyond bounds. Some people want to do funny things like take a picture of it with their camera and say, "Ooh, look what I saw about you." Other people say, "Wow, you're somebody." And I don't know if I'm somebody or not, but I do wish that my mother could have known that our name, spelled correctly, our family name, was on a room. And I think it's funny sometimes too when I run into people and they say, "Gee, it's too bad they didn't spell your name right and they want me to be a Putnam." But it is the greatest honor, and it may cost in terms of labor and materials $40 to make a sign and post it, but the payment in terms of respect and making history real, making it not be meeting room one or meeting room two, but making it be Carter and Shields and Putman, and maybe that Putman room will be a Putman covert room. There's no limit to the number of people we can honor. And I want to thank Mr. Summers for bringing this forward and hope that you will honor Mr. Carter, Mr. Summers, and Mr. Tinsley by voting yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Putnam. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the county board? You can raise your hand. Okay, Shane Gilbert, we want to try that again.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there we go. Thanks.
Oh, cool. Sorry about that. It's the first time I ever used Zoom, so I appreciate you listening. So, yeah, I want to talk about the eviction moratorium in Champaign, just in the state of Illinois and nationally, and how that's sort of affecting local landlords. I know that's maybe not the most popular topic, but I kind of want to give the other side of the coin on what's happening for landlords and the sort of the insanity that we have to sort of work around right now. So specifically, what I have is I manage and rent homes in the Champaign-Urbana area, not campus property, just bread and butter properties in the Holiday Park, Southwood area, Scottswood area, those sorts of areas. And most of the people have been paying, but the problem is that 10 to 15% of the people that we rent to are sort of taking advantage of not paying rent and the moratorium. And so what I mean by that is they're just not responding, or they are, if somebody's having trouble paying rent, they would usually tell us, and they would sign the declaration, and we would tell them that, hey, they could go to the state of Illinois and they could apply for some help, or locally here with the stuff that we have in Champaign County. But for some people, they're deciding not to do that. And so that's becoming a problem. And what we have to try to do is we have to try to get a hold of them and get them a copy of this declaration, or where we have to serve them. And it's really easy to see what the declaration is. It's just a one-page document that basically states that, that they can't pay rent, and if they are not truthful in this, that they could pay a fine or go to jail or whatever. So what I'm sort of getting at is that they're not filling this out, and I know that they're not filling out, and I know that they're working because we can't serve them at their house. Usually we go to their place of work. And so what this is all sort of leading to is that as a property, if we can't collect rent on that, that adds up really quick. And over the last year, it's been, if we've got 3 or 4 people that haven't paid for a rent for a year, you can imagine that amount is pretty high. And so I'm just trying to sort of voice the alarm and say, hey, what can we do for landlords, locally, but also, statewide and also nationally. But I sort of had an idea just with paying taxes, if the taxes are due, and I know if we can't pay the taxes, that there's some interest paid on that. And so I don't know if we can forego that interest, but for me personally, there's going to be several properties that I'm not going to be able to pay on time. And if you multiply that in terms of multifamily housing and how that would work, if there was, you had a 10 unit and there's 2 or 3 or 4 people that didn't pay or haven't paid for a year, that becomes quite a problem too. And that sort of affects the value. So I know that's I said a lot there, but I'm just trying to make people aware of sort of I don't know if it's a crisis, but it's an issue. It's an issue with landlords. It's an issue with tenants that aren't paying and are not doing the right thing. And it's not all of them, but it's a handful. And so that's pretty much all I needed to say. And I don't know if anybody had any questions, but I felt like I needed to share that and kind of get the word out on what's happening on the other end. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gilbert. All right, are there any other members of the public that would like to comment? All right, we have Mike Ingram.
Hello, everybody. Coming through okay? Lovely. Okay. I wanted to echo a little bit of what my friend Miss Putman, that's Putman, iterated earlier. I'm really glad to see this resolution about the Shields Carter room. For those that don't know, via the recorder page, I had recently been doing kind of a deep dive for Black History Month on all of the Black elected countywide officials, and then I did one full research on all of the Black county board members who had ever served on the county board. And I had never been able to find any information about that, so I kind of had to go and do a deep dive, and it was really interesting. And I talked to some board members who had served back then, including Ms. Putman and our circuit clerk, Ms. McGrath. And every single person that I talked to had such incredible things to say about Lloyd Carter. I remember being around in an area where he was before, but he and I never knew each other. But I listening to other people talk about him and kind of this like this beacon of light that they speak of him as, I think is very impressive. And when I charted this, I did find out. So he would have been only the 4th Black Champaign County board member. He would have followed Lois Perkins, of course, Miss Cohort, and Fanny Patterson. And I think the way that people talk about him and the way that Ms. Putman actually mentioned, perhaps one day her room even being named adjoining with somebody else, I think those names that I just mentioned there might be great candidates one of these days as well. Ms. Cohort has served with distinction for as long as I've literally been alive. So thank you, Ms. Cohort, for your service all those years. You've actually been on the board the entirety of my life, and that's incredibly impressive. And I found out while doing this that you actually, I did not know that Mark Sheldon had ever run for county board before, but that you actually beat Mark Sheldon one time. So I thought that was interesting. I thought he had always been undefeated. So anyway, I just wanted to speak in favor of this. I think it's wonderful, and I really appreciate this being brought forth. And I think it would be a great honor for him. And I wanted to just say thanks to Jenny Putman for speaking about her time as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the board? You could raise your hand at this time. All right, seeing none, moving on the agenda is for board communication. Are there any board members who had any communications they would like to share? All right, seeing none, we are on to policy, personnel, and appointments with Chair Storr.
Thank you, Chairman Patterson. We received the monthly human resources report in the handout that was circulated this afternoon. And I'll just call your attention to the turnover, about 1.5% average over the last 12 months. And the chronic problem that we have with replacing people, not replacing, but finding successors for the people who work for the county for a time and then move on to other, sometimes better paying jobs. We have a number of positions that are vacant, and they can be found on page 6 of the handout. Moving off that to the appointments and reappointments, we have quite a list, and I would entertain a motion to as an omnibus motion to appoint items 2A through 2R, and I'll go ahead and read those. Resolution appointing Daryl Schiff to the Mount Cemetery Association, unexpired time ending 6/30/2026. Resolution appointing David Bosch to
Mr.
the
Storr.
Broadland. Yes, sir.
Ms. Cowart has her hand raised.
Oh, Ms. Cowart. Ms. Cowart? Lorraine, you're muted.
Okay, I was gonna just second it. The omnibus motion.
Thank you for making the omnibus motion. Do I have a second?
Second, King.
Thank you, Board Member King. I'll go ahead and continue with reading the appointments. Resolution appointing David Bosch to the Broadlands Longview Fire Protection District, term ending May 1st, 2021 through May 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Jill Stewart to the Ed Scott Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing John Flavin to the Ivesdale Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Patrick Quinlan to the Ludlow Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Tyler Wright to the Ogden Royal Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Chris Hausman to the Fasodum Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 to April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Mike McHenry to the Philo Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Douglas Enos to the Sangamon Valley Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Paul Burbaum to the Scott Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Richard Denhart to the St. Joseph Stanton Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Michael Tittle to the Thomas Borough Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Vicky Foley to the Tolono Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through May 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Dennis Davis to the Tolono Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing David Dupre to the Windsor Park Fire Protection District, term May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2024. Resolution appointing Matthew Hausman to the Mental Health Board, an expired term ending December 31st, 2023. Resolution appointing Daphne Mauer to the Mental Health Board, unexpired term ending December 31st, 2024. Resolution appointing County Board member Stan Harper as the alternate liaison to the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee. Would anybody care to speak to the motion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Store,
Yes.
Strab,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes, if you called me.
yes, Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Motion appears to pass. Thank you. I'll call your attention to vacant appointments. There are several, including Public Health District, Zoning Board of Appeals, and so forth. The link is in the agenda. And we have appointments for applications for open appointments, information only. Sonoras Fire Protection District, Mark Eckerty, Locust Grove Cemetery Association, Catherine Stacy. Urbana Champaign Sanitary District, Dr. Derek Winstonley, Penfield Water Protection District, Steve Parrish, Sangamon Valley Public Water District. We have 5 people: Colleen Schultz, Austin Tabling, Sabrina Andrulis, Megan Hennessy, and Olin Parkhill. Developmental Disabilities Board, 2 positions, but only 1 applicant. So Dr. Tim Walwick Fisher. I encourage the board members to talk with their constituents and see if we can find another appointment for this very important board. Moving on to item number 3, a recommendation to the Finance Committee for approval of the creation of the Director of Operations position in salary grade J and the concurrent elimination of the Director of Training position. Can I have a motion?
I'll move, Lakshin.
Thank you.
Second, Thorsland.
Okay, thank you. Is there discussion? This resolution, when we vote on it, will be taken up by the Finance Committee later in the meeting. Mr. Goss. Mr. Goss.
Yeah, sorry. I couldn't get my fingers to work fast enough. Yeah, thank you.
That's all right.
My question would be, it looks like I realize we're not creating a new position for this, but it appears that this position is taking up part of the deputy's position. And if we're taking away the deputy's work, I wanted to know why the deputy had so much work that we couldn't get it done and had to move it around. It appears to me from election judges that I've talked with that certainly director of training could be better than what it is. Feels like when we went in and voted, judges have complained about the lack of training that has been provided and the confusion that has happened, especially here in the consolidated elections with ballots not feeding, ADA terminals or terminals. There was just a lot of confusion for a consolidated election that, you know, had 15,000 voters. And so to me, that falls back on training and getting rid of or consolidating training and moving this up. It looks like this is just an attempt to raise the salary of an employee in that office that's been tried before. So I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goss. Mr. Humphrey, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I want to speak in support of this. Having looked at a lot of what's been going on, especially the last several cycles, I mean, it's not a position that needs to be what it is. It certainly can take on different roles. And honestly, it's not much of our business, really, if he wants to call one position something or another position something else, as long as the work's getting done. And if the clerk feels like, hey, the work could be getting better done if we have this person who's the director of training taking on a new title and taking on different roles in the office, that's great. We can't sit here and complain about the office not working this or not working that and then say, well, we don't want you to make any changes, though. We want you to continue doing this thing that we were complaining about a second ago. And I will say I've spoken to a lot of election judges. They have all been fawning and just glowing about the clerk's work, just absolutely ecstatic. Several Republicans have been telling me, hey, he's been doing great. We really feel like the training is now comprehensive. Before it really wasn't doing so great. So, you know, I don't know what other people are hearing, but I've heard a lot of great things about the training as it is. So I'm happy. I'm glad to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. Ms. Furtado.
I'll be supporting this resolution. I just, to some degree, I would like to echo what Mr. Humphrey said, and I would say this regardless of the party that the elected official was in. I believe that the elected officials and department heads, as long as they follow through the process of the job evaluation committee, should have the discretion to organize their departments how they see that is the best way to manage the business operations that they have. I'll be honest, I never really understood why the former clerk had a full-time person doing training, because that seemed to me something that didn't happen all year long, you know what I'm saying, annually. But I also thought that was the former clerk's business. And I never brought that up with the former clerk. As long as there's not a budgetary impact, where that's where I feel that the board would need to come in and address that. And this is not that case. In fact, this office has regularly underspent their personnel budget. But for me, regardless of who is asking for this, if they follow the process, the recommendation of the job evaluation committee was to move the position. I think that the structural organization of each department should be left to the person administering that department.
Thank you, Ms. Furtado. Ms. Jenny Lockshin.
I think Mr. Goss had his hand up before me. I don't know if that.
Oh,
No?
Jim,
Okay.
Jim, did you? Oh,
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. Thanks,
Okay.
no problem.
go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in as somebody who trained as an election judge in 2016 and worked, I think, every election since 2017 on until I was appointed to the county board. I echo what others have said. I don't think it's our business necessarily what the title is that a person would be working under in the office, but I just wanted to say that I think Director of Operations is a lot better summary of what, under both clerks that I've worked as an election judge for, is a better summary of what that person does than just Director of Training, because they really do a lot more in the office. And things that I've seen with them other than just training judges. And that is a lot of work, training judges, because there are hundreds of us for every election. And we don't get we don't just get trained once. We have to repeat that training every year. So it is a lot. And I think there's a lot more going on than just training encompasses.
Thank you, Ms. Lockshin. Ms. Diane Michaels.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I understand that elected officials have a lot of leeway within their department, and I don't have a problem with that. But my question would be this, is that whole area will probably be undergoing some reorganization anyway as they take on the responsibility of the recorder's office. Even if it stays down the hall, no problem. But I'm sure there'll be different people put in place, or you may be someone from that recorder's office reporting to somebody else within the clerk's office. And I'm wondering if there's just going to be an overall reorganization of the clerk's office, and then we could see the whole picture at once instead of a little bit here and a little bit there. That's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Michaels. Mr. Stanley Harper, would you care to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Storr. I guess my concern is we just keep spending money there. And I know if it's within his budget, he can do with what he wants. But I'm not seeing the efficiency that everybody's praising onto this deal. I know for a fact in 2020, a parent called me that morning in the primary when a 16-year-old was on the ballot. The same election facilities, the tabulator wasn't picked up when the community went in to clean it the next day. You know me, do the work, I'll applaud you, but I'm not applauding this. A couple of years ago, you guys heard me at budget time when we were giving him $468,000. I said, we've been short of deputies in the rural area for 07, 08 recession time. Oh, we're going to save this money and it's going to be looked at. I haven't heard a word about it yet. I can't keep giving more money to this position. You know, we did the 468,000, and then we did another 100,000 for software. Show me where this is good, then I'll support it. But right now I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Chairman Kyle Patterson.
Thanks. I see that the county clerk is here tonight, and I was wondering if he could address this topic and kind of explain, you know, in response to what he's heard, sort of why he wants to pursue changing this position.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Mr. Ammons, Clerk Ammons, would you care to speak to the motion?
I would love to. Ms. Patton, are you on the call?
I am.
Would you please go ahead?
So this, as Board Member Furtado mentioned, we went through, this came up before and it was denied to even go through the process of the JEC. We took it back and then resubmitted and went through the entire process, the JEC concurred with what we put forward and recommended the grade above classification. So we feel like we did our due diligence and are trying to set this up in a way that makes sense for our office to kind of address what Board Member Goss was asking about with the Chief Deputy. Surprisingly, the Director of Training duties do not overlap with mine. There's a pretty good chunk that is pretty intensive HR, and to address what Board Member Michaels put forward was that in your packet, hopefully it was included, what was part of what we submitted to JEC was a sort of a new org chart with keeping in mind that the Recorder of Deeds office may be absorbed into ours. And that's really sort of also what this is addressing is sort of a shift in responsibilities where the Recorder of Deeds that transition will be overseen primarily by me. That means that the director of operations will be picking up elections and taxes. And to be perfectly honest, this is work that is already currently being done. And with respect to the training, every election, we put in evaluation forms and feedback forms for election judges and workers. And we have had, and I'm not just saying this because it's our office and I want to brag, but I do kind of want to brag. I can't tell you how much work and effort went into rebuilding training manuals from scratch, and then having to transition that online. And if anybody thinks that that was easy, I'd like to invite you to try it one time. There's been a lot of effort put into training with a very specific focus on helping people get more comfortable with computers and incorporating new technology that has completely transformed how election judges are able to communicate directly with our office on election day. Our phones barely ring on election day. I can't tell you how transforming this has been. And the director of training has been on the very front of that. And we have not heard anything but really positive feedback. And any feedback that we get about making adjustments, we definitely take into consideration. And but by and large, all of our feedback has been so positive. We have a wall of comments from election judges that have gone through the training and are just very appreciative. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Before Chairman Patterson, I would like to add something, if that's all right.
Yeah, you're good.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I'm sorry, Chris. I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes here. I want to speak to the money aspect of this. When I came into office, there was a company by the name of Liberty that came to speak with me and share with me a document that I'm happy to share with any of the board members that showed where my predecessor was going to spend $996,900 for new equipment and to revamp the clerk's office. $996,900. And the plan was because he thought he was going to win the county executive position, that he would then maneuver the money from the savings from the nursing home and then make this maneuver happen somehow. So when I came in, I negotiated with the current vendor to get that $996,000 down to $834,000, which saved the county immediately $163,000. Okay, because this equipment has to be updated. As the clerk, this is a mandated office. I must facilitate elections and I must have the equipment that I need, the modern equipment that I need to do that. As you all know, the M100s that were replaced when I came in to advocate for the first allotment of money, they're not even manufactured anymore. That's what we were working with in Champaign County. So you can try to put this in my lap as if I did all of this or try to spend a bunch of money, but these are things that needed to be updated. So once I got the first allotment, which was $450,000 or $483,000 to replace all of the M100s to buy new DS200s, we did that. And our understanding and agreement with the county board is that I would come back in 21 for the $351,000 to purchase the express votes. Well, we've already saved $85,000 of that $350,000. When Tammy Ogden came to us and said, hey, can we reduce that number? We reduced it, I think, by almost $250,000 from the beginning of what we were supposed to spend. And now we have a potential grant that's going to come in to help us buy all of them, so we wouldn't have to come to, am I frozen?
Only your video. Your voice is coming through.
All right, thank you. So this savings, as you can see now, you all did not have to spend what you would have spent from the beginning.
Yeah. Oops, we lost you.
So I'm just going to finish off what he was saying about the grant money. And that we are going to be able to utilize a grant, an accessibility grant coming up. We'll have more information to share, hopefully next board meeting, but I think it's going to allow us to purchase the remaining express votes. Any differential in our budget, which we already have the money to cover this, it will be covered by grant funds just because of the scope of the work the director of training is doing in IVRS. I also want to bring up really quickly that when I came in, the clerk brought me in at significantly under what the current clerk salary was at a savings to the county. And we have continued to, when we have had grants that we were able to reimburse the general fund to dump money back in, we have at every turn done that with reimbursements, and Tammy Ogden can confirm that. And we're happy to do that because we know it's what is good for the county.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Aaron. Sorry that we lost you. Mr. Jim McGuire.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for the answers that we're receiving tonight. I actually have had a lot of complaints about the last election, how the precincts were moved, people concerned about whether they're able to vote or not. I had a problem with the mail-in ballot boxes used the last minute. I think it disenfranchised voters throughout the rural area of the county. The express machines or the ADA machines, touch screens that Aaron's talking about, my understanding was that they were purchased for ADA, but people were being pushed to vote on them. And it apparently created a problem with the election for some people, because I think that the touch screens were asking people to vote for everything and or bypass it. And apparently we've got candidate very upset about that. People were moved from Southwest Champaign up to Parkland to vote. I think that disenfranchised voters. So when we're talking about giving somebody additional money or creating a new position, hasn't anything to do with really the position, but whether the elections are being handled properly, especially when there's headlines in the paper about continuing errors in the ballots. But the express machine issue, I don't know when, I suppose the clerk can make this policy decision, but to move from paper ballots filled out by the person to a machine that they print out a little piece of paper that they may not be able to read to check their vote, is a pretty significant change in the election. So there's a lot of issues that I have, so I won't be supporting this either. And I'd like to see those problems corrected, as many voters would also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Ms. King, would you care to speak to the motion?
Yes, my husband was one of the people who voted on the touchscreen at Brookins, and he said it was an incredibly simple process, that it was very open and transparent, and that someone who'd gone before him had an issue, but it was a user error issue. It was not the machine itself, and it was very, very easily remedied by the staff there. And that obviously the people who are running these machines, at least at Brookins, were well trained on them, and he had had absolutely no problems. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Patton for the amount of work she's been doing, because Angie used to work for my organization, and I know that she is an incredibly organized and competent person and never asks for anything that she doesn't think an organization needs.
Thank you very kindly, Ms. King. Chair Patterson, would you care to speak?
Yeah, I also wanted to comment. I also use the express voting machine. And for you guys who don't know, it's essentially, it's like a touch screen that you vote on touching the candidates, and you have a much more narrow card that goes into the machine, and the machine actually, once you're done, prints the results on it, and then you submit it through the same machine. I found it very convenient. Yes, I had heard the claim that it was not allowing people to do an undervote. And I mean, that's just absolutely, I mean, that's not true. I personally did not vote for all of the candidates in some races. And it does give you an alert letting you know that you didn't fill it in. But I imagine that there might have been some user confusion or something of that nature, because, I was absolutely able to submit a ballot that I didn't vote for everybody. So we should clear that up. And also there was a comment made about drop boxes in rural areas. Sort of, Angie, if you could tell me, are there in the state law, are there requirements for population required for a drop box to be in that township or that area?
Yeah, so I can't.
I'm back. I'm sorry, I got cut off, y'all.
Thank God. All right. So did you hear what Chair Patterson asked?
No, I did not. And I don't know how much of what you all heard of what I was saying about the cost savings, but
I finished it off.
Okay.
I finished it off for you. The comment was, the question was about drop boxes in rural areas and population requirements, and asked for us to speak to that. Board Member McGuire had some questions about no access to the drop boxes in rural areas.
So I would repeat that I have every intention. We spoke with Savoy today. We've spoke to Tolono. We have every intention of putting drop boxes, the permanent drop boxes, in Muhammad, Tolono, Rantoul, St. Joe, Savoy, and another location in Champaign, in the northwest Champaign, where it does not have a location. Right now, none of the legislation has any sort of requirements from a population density standpoint. But when we look at the areas that are active, that have the largest populations, then I have every intention of making sure that those voters have access. I am committed to making sure that all voters who are eligible voters have fair, free, and accessible elections. So we did the drive and drops out there, and that showed us that the people wanted them. So that's what we intend to do. I don't know if I hope that answers your question, Jim.
And also, there's a mention of, they're only available for a short period this election. And now, is that because of the state legislation?
Yes, and everybody knows that. I wish we could just really be authentic and have real conversations about what's serious issues. Everybody knows that the governor did not sign that bill until like April 2nd. And so I did what I could to try to make the boxes available, because that's access for people. That's what that means. So this notion that I'm trying to look out for Democrats, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I have the boxes closed the whole time if I was looking out for Democrats? I wish we could just really deal with the business.
And also, there was mention that the express voting machines, the computers, were for ADA purposes. Is that true?
Yes. So we had what was called a VAT, a voter assisted terminal, which were defunct. They were part of the old broken down equipment along with the M100s that we had, and I had to get rid of them. So the express vote is to replace that. Its number one focus is to make sure that people who are differently abled will have access to the ballot in a way that is dignified and private, as they did not have that with the previous machines. I think you all may be aware of an individual who came, and we put the video up on the website, where this individual is vision impaired, and for the first time in years, he was able to come and use the machine by himself to regain his own dignity and privacy, because he did not have to have a Democrat and a Republican sit there with him and then him read to them who he wants them to vote for on his behalf. So these machines are extremely important to our overall objective in the clerk's office, and to make sure that our disabled population has the dignified experience that they deserve. Now, they are also, Chairman Patterson, anyone can use these machines. They are very easy. They are very efficient. They're fast. It saves us money. We don't have to buy a lot of paper that we would have to buy if we use our regular voting process with the large ballots. These are much slimmer and thinner sheets of paper. So it's a cost savings in the long run for the county, and it creates a very dignified experience for many of our voters.
Thank you, Clerk Ammons.
Thank you.
Ms. Lee Taylor, would you care to speak to the motion?
I certainly would like to. We seem to have gotten off track of that a little bit, and we're talking about elections now. To bring it back to the motion, from my perspective, as long as any office is staying inside of their budget for personnel, I don't care what their org chart looks like. It doesn't matter to me from a board perspective. They could change it every 3 months, and I will happily vote yes, as long as they stay in their budget and everything's covered. Why would I care? Our job is not to micromanage another department's organizational chart. And secondly, I would like to also say that for a group that sure gets angry and frustrated and constantly complains about efficiency and the job getting done in the clerk's office, why do you all keep trying to hobble him? I mean, this is a position that he feels he needs. This is not our decision to make. It's just our decision to say, yeah, go for it. This isn't something that we should really have any input in as to why he needs it. It's just needed, and we're going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. McGuire?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'd like to ask and get answered my own questions. The difference in the mail-in ballot boxes were that they were locally stationed in Champaign-Urbana, and other people didn't have access. And the difference is, it's not that other areas won't have eventually, but this, in the middle of this election, those ballot boxes were added and gave easier access to just the voters that are here. And the issue is, we're creating a position or increasing the responsibilities of somebody who made those decisions incorrectly. The 88 touchscreens, it's great that we have 88 touchscreens. The problem was that the undervote and its warning caused people to think that they weren't that they had to vote for everybody for that position or that elected office. Another issue that's a problem. People do want paper ballots. They want to be able to darken in the oval so they know exactly who they're voting for. Making a change is a policy change by the county, and that creates some problems for people that vote. And again, there are errors on the ballot. This is about the performance of the county board. And when the public complains or has an issue with an election and they don't feel confident about their election, that's an issue for us to bring up to the county clerk. So, and whether they should have changes in their office. Thank you.
Mr. Storer, if you don't mind, this question that we are discussing at this moment as to whether or not you all will vote yay or nay on the director of operations position. All of the attacks on me and my office or my staff are par for the course for what I have seen since I've been here. So this is nothing new. But what we're discussing right now is whether or not I, as a department head, as an elected official, will have the autonomy that I'm supposed to have to run the office the way that I see fit, because the voters, the majority of the voters decided that I should be the county clerk. And so I have decided to structure this office in this particular way to address the concerns that I see that we need and the issues that we need to address in the office. So this is what I am proposing. I have the money in my budget to do that. I have not asked for any money from the general fund. So the objective of our friends to try to rake me over the coals in the public for whatever reason, I wish we could get on with the business and call the question on what is actually we're here to talk about.
Well, if anybody cares to call a question, I'll certainly recognize that. Thank you for reminding us what the motion under consideration is. And yeah, we'll get to you, Stan, Mr. Harper. And I just remind you that we've got a motion under consideration. Mr. Harper, would you care to speak to the motion?
No, just call the question, Mr. Storer. Thank you.
Okay, question has been called. I don't see any other hands up. I think that we could call the roll. Ask the clerk to please call the roll on the recommendation of the motion under consideration. Clerk, not you, Aaron, but Megan or whoever.
Thank you,
Megan.
Mr. Storer. Goss,
No.
Harper,
No.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lokshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
No, thank you.
Michaels,
No.
Pesalakwa,
No.
Paul,
No.
Rodriguez,
Absolutely, yes.
Store,
Yes.
Straub,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes, let the court do his job.
Esri,
No.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Okay, I get 15-7. Motion seems to pass. And we'll go on to the item number 4, redistricting advisory group update. I saw that County Board Chair Kleppel is on the is among the attendees. Would you care to speak to the redistricting advisory committee progress?
Sure, I would love to do that. So I've given the board a couple of things in your packet, but I want to talk a little bit about what my advisory group is doing. We started meeting. I picked members for this group to help me as we started talking about redistricting, because it happens only once every 10 years. So you have to really get educated on how this works. The redistricting advisory group was chosen back in December, and we started meeting in January. But then the census information was late in coming, and so we just kind of delayed. We didn't meet very often. We got ourselves oriented and learned about the process. And then recently, the direction came from the state level that there was going to be no changes in how the state viewed the deadlines for the maps to be drawn. In some states, the state legislatures have revised those maps to revised the deadlines for the maps, but in our state, they did not do that, and they didn't intend to do that. So that advice came to me, and so we started meeting more frequently. We're meeting once or twice a week now to look at the actual drawing of the maps. We are using Esri demographics, which is, in our opinion, pretty accurate estimates. Excuse me. The county board has decided recently that they're going to keep 11 districts and 2 members per district. So for the map drawing, just the number of districts makes a difference. So there'll be 11. In our county, based on our estimates of population, there's been a small amount of growth. Oh, well, not huge, but enough growth over the last 10 years that the district sizes will need to be a little bit larger. So there will be 19,353 people in an ideal district if they were all exactly equally divided. And so we're trying to use that as one of our criteria to try to make the districts fairly equal. So the lines will need to move a little bit because our population did not remain constant, which means we're taking a look at the previous maps that were recommended and adopted in 2011. and starting with those as a starting point to say what was good about those maps. And then maybe if we adjust for the equal populations now, where would we move the lines? We're also collecting and inviting the public to participate in the map drawing. And we're inviting the public to develop or make suggestions for what's called communities of interest. So for example, if you were interested in keeping, one of the suggestions was to keep all of Rantoul together, on both sides of the highway. So just make sure that we keep all of Rantoul together. And so if that was a community of interest, we would try to consider keeping that together in one district. It is currently in one district right now, but depending on where we draw the line, it might or might not be. Other suggestions for communities of interest so far have been the north side of Champaign and Urbana across the city line of Wright Street, to keep a Black community in a majority, which also is the way the district is drawn right now. But the line would have to move a little bit for population changes if we did that. The one other suggestion was to be sure that we keep the rural areas rural, which, as you know, as the cities are growing outward, the urban areas are beginning to encroach on the rural district. So we need to take a look at those lines as well. And then another idea which came up was to try to capture the student population, because they're a fairly large population in our county and deserve representation. And so we were trying to figure out a way to do that, because you really can't necessarily do it by age or other demographic information, but we decided to take a look at the urban area and see what would happen if we circumscribed campus housing, which would be like from First Street over to Lincoln Street, and then from University down to Kirby. And it turns out that's actually almost exactly a district. So that was just one idea as well. Another idea was to keep a school district together. Mahomet and Seymour School District is together, so those families and kids are used to being together. So the idea was to try to keep Mahomet and Seymour in the same district. Some of these things are already in the current districts, and others of them are new ideas. So we are continuing to accept those from folks. And if you're interested in participating, or if you know people that are interested in participating, they can go to the county's website. Everything that we've done, all of the meeting videos, all of the tools that we're using, all of the descriptions of everything and how you can participate are all included on the county's website under the tab that's called redistricting. So if you go to the home page, there's a tab for redistricting, and all the information can be found on that page. So we'd be happy to have more input from more community members or groups in the community. I know there's at least a couple of people in the community that are interested in drawing full maps. And you can also make comments on the maps that we're drawing now, or we're as we talk about them or move them in the direction that we'd like the lines to go. There can be public comments made right on the maps themselves, and people can draw communities of interest right on the maps themselves. What I will say is that the public version is a freeware product. And so the exact demographics are not exactly the same perfectly to what we're using for our final product. So the numbers or the lines may shift just slightly as we move it over into the Esri product. But it'll be very close. The public freeware is pretty close. So at least we can get an idea. I also put in your information a timeline. If we're going to follow the process that the state has outlined for the districting, the timeline needs to be, I need to bring a map for recommendation to the county board by the middle of May, which for you guys would be the May 11th committee of the whole. And then you guys have time to consider that map for about 6 weeks. You're required to finalize a vote by the 1st of July, which means that you'd have to do it at your meeting, probably your June board meeting. You also are required, the board is required to have at least one public hearing. You can do more than one if you want to, but you're required to do at least one. And it has to be within the certain time frame of when I give you the map. It has to be actually between 6 days and 21 days before you approve the map is the rule. So those things I put in your memo and the memo as well, so that you had that timeline to look at. And I apologize, Chris, or somebody in the Democratic caucus caught that I put the wrong date. It wasn't July 15th was your committee of the whole, it was June. So thank you for catching that error. And then if the board cannot come to a decision at that point about what map they would like to adopt, it goes into additional steps, which involve having the map drawn by a 5-person commission. And if that doesn't happen successfully, we go into at-large elections. So I don't think the county's ever been in that position where it's gotten that far. I do believe at some time in the past, they had a 5-person commission. But that would be up to the board at that point, whether you can reach a decision about your map or not. So that's where we're at. I'd be happy to take questions. I'm trying to let people know that we're doing this as much as possible. It's a little more difficult trying to do these meetings on Zoom. We're trying to share maps and things, but it's, the technology is working out okay. We're distributing information about how people can participate through a variety of, either news media or specific groups in the community that are probably going to be interested, like, for example, the Farm Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, the NAACP, the Progressive Dems, I went to both central committees and talked to them about it. So I'm hoping the word is getting out to people that are interested in with the maps. And the League of Women Voters also tonight, tomorrow night, and Thursday night is doing a series on districting, not just for the county, but for all kinds of districting, the state and the federal. I think they're just doing some forums so that people get more informed about it. So I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody has them, or take suggestions if the board has them at this point.
Mr. McGuire, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Darlene, the only thing I have is my understanding is the Hispanic population has grown, and depending on the data source, which you mentioned, people could be underrepresented in the count. Are you aware of that? And do we have a way of making sure we have a better understanding of that population? Thank you.
Sure. So the ESRI demographics is the database we're using for the population. It's a database that's used by the ESRI company. They're the people that we use for our GIS mapping and those kind, and a lot of different kinds of mapping and demographic information. Historically, their data has been a little bit closer to what ends up being the actual numbers than the American Community Survey, which is, I think, the statistics that the state is using for the state districting. The last American Community Survey estimates came out in 2018. And so we feel like the ESRI data will be a little bit closer. There was some other concern about potentially different populations being undercounted in this census. I know there was a significant amount of effort put forth, particularly to capture people that might have been not captured in past, with regard to people that may not speak English or people that are reluctant to put information into a government database. There was a huge significant outreach in our county to help with those things. And so we feel pretty confident that a lot of them were captured in the actual census. And it will be interesting to see whether or not that shows up as an undercount in the estimates. But all of those things were taken into consideration as best they could be during the estimating. So we'll just have to see how that works. If you're interested in the communities of interest, we're thinking that the only population that we would at this time be able to necessarily classify as a community of interest based on race would be the Black community. And there is a high concentration, over 60% of the population again, as I mentioned, in the north part of Champaign and Urbana. If we did some kind of district around that area, which there currently is as well, that's probably the only population. We do have a growing Hispanic population in our community. The problem is that they're spread out. They're not in any one location. And so it would be difficult to do an area with a community of interest. But we could certainly look at that if people know of pockets or things that we should look at. We're happy to consider all suggestions. Ms. Furtado, your hand is raised. Did you have a question?
No, just really quickly, I wanted to just say thank you to Mr. McGuire, because I think that's a really important question. and that thinking about how race and communities of interest, that's very, very important. So thank you to Jim for that question. And I also just wanted to thank, we have a board member, Tatiana Ammons, who worked tirelessly on the census and trying to outreach to communities and try to make sure that our count was as representative as possible of communities, all members of our community. So I just wanted to also thank her for the work that she did before she got on the board that puts us in a better space to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I know there is some criticism, particularly at the state level, about not waiting for the census because the state legislature would be the only place they could change those deadlines. So I realized there was some feedback when the state was doing their public hearings on that topic.
Ms. Kleppel, you mentioned that the ESRI demographics data, where do they get their data from and how do they validate that?
You can go on the web, you can go onto the redistricting location and there's a link to the ESRI statistics website. So you can see where the data is coming from.
Okay, so you're not sure at this point.
I personally haven't read that yet, so I don't have the answer for you.
Okay.
I'm looking to see, maybe Leanna is I'm looking to see if she's here tonight. I don't think she is.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I hope
Sorry.
they still have an opportunity to come to a future meeting and talk to us about this because I think I'd be most interested in the details myself. I hope
They're on the website. The link is on the website about the ESRI demographics and exactly how they do their calculations.
But there's a lot of other user inputs. Okay, that said, I think we can, is there any other questions for Ms. Kleppel on redistricting advisory group? That said, thank you, thank you, County Executive Kleppel.
Thank you.
It just happens that the next item is the county clerk's monthly report, and I see that Aaron Ammons is present. And one item that I noticed is a rather, large number of marriages reported. Do we know how many marriages were occurred to kind of make such a large increase in the marriage license fee?
You said there was an increase when we discussed this.
There was nearly $5,400 in marriage licenses, and I think you might have said something.
As we were going through COVID, there were a lot of people who could not get access to the courthouse or they couldn't secure locations. So I think the number of marriages went down, and now that things are starting to relax a little bit, people are signing up for more marriages and getting their licenses.
Great. Good news, and we'll take it. There being under item C. Thank you, Aaron. Clerk Ammons. Next item is item C, other business. Number 1, county board. A, resolution for designating meeting room 1 as the Shields Carter meeting room. Do we have a motion for that resolution? Lorraine, did I hear Lorraine? I think Lorraine made the motion. Okay, motion by Lorraine Cowart. Do we have a second by Stephanie Furtado? I'm getting some feedback. And we'll ask for anybody care to speak to the motion. I'm going to Steve Summers, would you care to speak to the motion?
The only thing that I would like to say that is in drafting this resolution, there was absolutely no intent to minimize the contributions of Lyle Shields to the county board. So simply to honor the contributions of Lloyd Carter Jr. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Next up is Brad Pasalakwa. Would you care to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mr. Storr. I didn't know Lloyd Carter personally. It sounds like it was terrific, but I see this as a half measure because if in fact he was that great, then I don't respect, support co-naming. I think that he deserves his own, and I'm not concerned that it takes away from any honor that was given to Lyle Shields, but I just think it really takes away to it. And through other discussion, I'm not sure if it's genuine, and I think it's got a lot of politics in it, but I will believe that this person had the credentials to qualify for an honor, but I don't see this as an honor to put his name on a room with someone else. So I will not support it in this shape.
Thank you, Mr. Pasalakwa. Lorraine, would you care to speak to the motion? You have your hand up.
Yes, I'll be voting yes on this resolution because I think it is an honor, and I think it'll be a great privilege and a great honor for Carter and Shields to be together because in real life they were friends. So I'll be voting yes on this motion.
Lorraine, you had a very sketchy audio connection. Have you completed your statement or your? Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Cowart. Next up, I have Ms. Stephanie Furtado.
Hey, thanks. So I have to admit, this kind of thing always intrigues me because I'm an historian, and one of the things I study is space and how we think about spaces. And so this kind of thing is like what I think about a lot in my regular life all the time. And so I kind of went back and read some news articles, both about Mr. Shields and Mr. Carter. And what I discovered is, one, I wish that I had had the opportunity to know both of them because they both seemed like exceptional people. But two, that I think it seems incredibly fitting to name a room for them together. So when I was reading from the News Gazette with the passing of Mr. Shields, County Administrator Deb Busey, who I have the utmost respect for, said of Mr. Shields, he was respected and a real gentleman. Board member Steve Moser said, he was honest, he got along with both sides, he listened to anybody about anything. Michael Frericks, now Treasurer Frericks, said, Lyle and I had bordering districts on the county board, and so every now and then we would work on issues in and around Rentoul. He was just a real gentleman to work with and serve with. And then reading about Mr. Carter, when he first, all the way back in 1971, talking to the Courier, when that was still around, he said, I think we could get more done if we work together. And Patricia Avery, when she was remembering her friend Lloyd, he said he was a consensus builder. And I think that compromise was not a bad word for him. So when I hear about that from both perspectives of both of the legacies of these two gentlemen, the idea of having them have a room that's named together, since both of them embodied that spirit of collaboration and actually getting things done, that I would love to see this current iteration of the board do. To me, I can't think of anything more fitting than to name a room for them together.
Thank you, Ms. Furtado. Chair Kyle Patterson, would you care to speak to the motion, please?
Yeah, I just first want to reiterate how grateful I am for Jenny Putnam's comments. You know, I'm biased. I'm a huge fan of Jenny, but I think that she's one of the most insightful and experienced people in this community when it comes to county government. And I mean, I could listen to her for hours and just nerd out about, you know, county history and just that deep knowledge. And to really bring that perspective of two people who not only served together, but were friends across political lines. And I think that relationship existed just kind of goes to show how important this is. I think, you know, it was stated earlier that this is sort of, you know, giving half of a name to somebody, but, you know, really I think that this is a true symbol of bipartisanship. People always talk about how the county board fights all the time and they, you know, give us crap, and, you know, people have different theories about the size or whatever. But I mean, the truth of the matter is that we cover a much larger area than any local government body does. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of, you know, we cover the whole county. But I mean, we have an extremely politically diverse board. I mean, that is in the nature. We have very rural districts, we have very urban districts. There is a political divide there that's uncharacteristic of other local boards. And I think that this is a symbol of bipartisanship, and to have a room that is a reminder of that friendship, that while those two probably disagreed on, you know, lots of issues, there was still that bond there. And so I don't at all think that this is short selling anybody. I don't think that this is taking anything away from Mr. Shields, and I don't think that this is discounting Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. Mr. Jim McGuire, would you care to speak to the motion? Would you please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Storr. Yeah, I mean, I served with Jennifer Putnam. Actually knew her before she even was a county board member. Came to meetings. We had some great conversations. She did a great job on the county board. Been there for a long time. Her name is on the other room. Not to belittle her, but those people that decided that a long time ago did based on her experience, her service to the county. Many of the county boards, people that are on the county board, Langenheim or anybody has done a wonderful job on a county board. Mr. Carter, I really enjoyed serving with him. He was to the point. He pushed hard for our community. He was a veteran. I'm actually the one that got the flag flown over the Capitol for him when we, talked about him when he came off the board. He's got 27 years of service, as they talked about. The difference, I think, is that Lyle Shields in that article that Stephanie referenced had 41 years of service on the county. 10 years of those were a county board chair. Now, Mr. Carter did a great job, but kind of like some people have said, put him together. Maybe there's someplace to honor him somewhere else, but the people that put that name on the board room did it based on the long years of service of Mr. Shields, but also his 10 years as chairman and the way he represented the county and worked with other county board members to accomplish a lot of different things that happened in the county. So while I can understand wanting to honor Mr. Carter, obviously over time, including county board member Ferricks, when he was county board member, they thought that Lyle Shields' name should be on the boardroom. I think it should remain that way. I think we should find something else from Mr. Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Mr. Aaron Esri, would you speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I guess I'd like to kind of basically echo and then add to some of what Mr. Pascalaqua and Mr. McGuire have said previously. Having served with Mr. Carter, he was a guy that I don't know of anyone who couldn't like him as a person. He was a great guy in that respect, easy to like, easy to talk to. I took him home after a board meeting when someone brought him there, and after the board meeting, there was no one left to take him home. In his later years, had no problem doing that. Found it interesting, though, that he was just basically left there after the board meeting with no one to take him home. But to me, the idea that, as Mr. Pascalaqua said, that you're, and Mr. McGuire, kind of, if you combine their two sayings, that you put what they've said, that you are adding this name to something that's just been the Shields room for a long time now, or a fair amount of time, and then putting Mr. Carter with it, it's kind of as if Mr. Carter is subservient to me in terms of the honor. I would rather see Mr. Carter's name on something like the gym here at Brookins, or at Brookins, with the idea that one of his big things in life, I know, was the young people. I think he was very proud of being a scoutmaster, and doing anything and everything he could for the young people in the community, in the county. So something like the gym, I would be more than happy to support, or some other room, but I can't really support it, I guess, at this point in time. I also can't necessarily support the resolution the way it's written. It mentions Mr. Carter being on the Champaign County Board from 1992 to 2016. But then on down, whereas Lloyd Carter Jr. brought respect, honor, and integrity to the people of Champaign County with his public service of over 35 years. Okay. It mentions nothing. Where's the missing 11 years at, or 92? Yeah, I believe it's 24 years that he was on the county board. So where's the missing 11 years? It makes no sense in that respect. So I would much rather see this come back with some other room in the building, the gym, or something else that we can put his name on. Something at the county, it obviously would need to be, and the resolution cleaned up some as well. So those are my thoughts at this point in time. Thanks.
You're muted, Chris.
You're muted, Chris. You're muted.
Probably the best I sounded all night. During the comments, I realized that I had neglected to read the resolution in its entirety, and I apologize to the board members for that. And I'd like to correct that oversight by reading the resolution in its entirety at this moment. And without objection, it's found on page 94. The resolution designating meeting room number 1 is the Lyle Shield as the Shields Carter meeting room, whereas Lloyd Carter Jr. represented the people of Champaign County from 1992 to 2016. And whereas his tenure as county board member, Lloyd Carter Jr. served on the following standing committees: Justice and Public Safety, Environment and Land Use, Highway and Transportation, and Justice and Social Service. And whereas during his tenure as county board member, Lloyd Carter Jr. also served in liaison positions as the county board's representative, on the Regional Planning Commission, Cooperative Extension Board, Martin Luther King Committee, and the Veterans Assistance Commission. And whereas Lloyd Carter Jr. was a decorated military veteran in the service of the United States. Whereas Lloyd Carter Jr. brought respect, honor, and integrity to the people of Champaign County with his public service of over 35 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the County Board of Champaign County that the County Board Meeting Room 1, located in the Brookings Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, is hereby named the Shields Carter Meeting Room in honor of Lloyd Carter Jr., presented, adopted, and approved this 22nd day of April, Anno Dominum 2021. Pardon me for not reading that resolution in its entirety. And I'd like to comment to the motion after everybody else does. Mr. Deputy Board Chair Steve Summers, would you speak to the motion, please?
I just want to add some clarification for my colleague, Mr. Essery. Lloyd Carter Jr. also served for 6 years on the Urbana City Council, as well as his 5 years of military service in the U.S. Navy. I did not think it was necessary to add his service on Urbana Council, as that's not really pursuant to what we are recognizing him for. But I believe if he adds those two numbers together, he will come up with the correct result. Thank you.
Dang it. Thank you, Mr. Summers. Ms. Michaels, would you speak to the motion, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just real quickly here. I was on the board with Lloyd. Wonderful man. Enjoyed every minute of him being on the board. And I do believe he deserves recognition. I'm just not quite there with it being the Shields Carter room. I'd like to have his own spot where he can be recognized just himself. But here's what I look at going down the line, which also kind of speaks to this, is we will have board members like this. I'm wondering if, and not necessarily starting with Lloyd, but maybe we need a plaque outside of the boardroom for these long tenured board chairs, people that have headed up different committees and things of that nature, because going down the road, we will want to do something nice for somebody else that has made a long standing, not just, today, but down the road, we will have more people to honor. Ms. Cohort is one. There's been other members on here that have been here a very long time. Mr. Urzer's been here a long time now, and maybe some of the others will serve, 10, 12 years. And that would be wonderful. But I do think that we are going to need to look for an opportunity to maybe honor some of these outstanding board members and their accomplishments. And we can't just keep renaming or adding names to a room. So I want to be really careful that we kind of think about this as a whole. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, Board Member Michaels. Mr. Essery, would you have further comments to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Summers with the 5 years in the military and 11 as an Urbana City Council, or 6, I'm sorry, 11 total years between those two. I guess I don't understand then, if it's not worth putting into words, why you would include the service in the resolution itself. Someone on down the line who doesn't know that history would look at this and wonder if we can add or not. I'm serious about that. The idea that you add it in the number of years that you say he served the community, which he did, but you don't put it in the resolution. That seems kind of disingenuous to me one way or the other. It seems like either that you should put it in there if you're going to include the years, because he did serve his community doing that. Or since this is kind of a, or I can also look at it, since this is county, well, since those years weren't truly county board related, I'm not going to put them specifically in the resolution, but I'll include it in the total years he served to make it kind of look better. That's kind of how I can look at it. I think it needs to be spelled out better and cleaned up one way or the other. Again, 1992 to 2016 are the only dates that are mentioned, and then you have 35 years. So the public 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, if Brookings is even still standing, will look at this, or somebody looking over the history and wonder, okay, 92 to 2016 is 24. I guess he must have been a military veteran for 11 years. That's the only thing they can come up with, because that's the only thing that is mentioned in this right now is the military veteran. So I guess they'll think he was in the military for 11 years and won't know about his Urbana City Council service for 6. So I would like to see it cleaned up and brought back.
Thank you. Board Member Emily Rodriguez, would you please speak to the motion?
Thank you. I just want to simply point out this could very easily just be the Lloyd Carter room. But yet here we are giving the opportunity to tack on a second name here. So take that for what you will. I am very interested in moving to call a question, but I see that Steve Summers has his hand raised, so I will delay doing that.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, would you proceed with your additional comments?
Certainly. An earlier draft did break it out into his service with the Urbana City Council. In talking with other folks, I determined that that was probably not something that needed to be, as it was not germane to his county board service.
Exactly.
I do have to comment, though, that when I brought this suggestion to the Republican caucus 2 years ago, and after repeated queries as to whether or not they would be supportive of it, received absolutely no input. It's very interesting that now, at the moment, you have a lot of questions and ideas. I would strongly suggest in the future, if you don't want to be disingenuous, you address the question when it's brought to you, rather than waiting 2 years to come up with other ideas. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Board Member Stanley Harper, would you speak to the motion, please?
Turn your volume up. You can start speaking.
Sorry about that. My mistake here on this end. I've been back and forth on this whole issue, and I'd like to hear from the Shields family, but I was all set to support that and probably still will. But Ms. Rodriguez, your threat of taking somebody's name off that served this county for 41 years is not very well received on my part. I mean, that was just downright rude. I served with Lloyd Carter, did you? That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Seeing no other comments, hands raised, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak my piece. I was particularly pleased to see recent board member James Tinsley speak to this motion, and the eloquence of long-serving board member Jenny Putman, who is a mentor of mine, and I speak for this motion. I did know Lloyd Carter very little, but I was quite moved at his funeral and touched by the number of people and the apparent high respect that was paid to him by so many people across the area. And I think that this is an appropriate and a healing time thing that we can do at this point. And I'll seeing no other, conclude my remarks and seeing that we see no other hands up, would Ms. Reagan, Ms. Robeson, would you please call the roll?
Goss,
No.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey, Humphrey, King,
Yes.
Lokshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
No, thank you.
Michaels,
At this time, no, thank you.
Pasalakwa,
Not as presented.
Paul,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Store,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri, Esri,
Not as presented, sorry.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
And Humphrey is a yes as well.
thank you.
Very good. I record 16 in favor, 5 in opposed. The motion passes. Next item D is the chair's report. And I will only say that I'd like to see at a future time some discussion about the jail modification and closure of the downtown jail, but that's not really on my particular purview. Designation of items to be placed on the consent agenda are items 2A through R. Chairman Patterson, that concludes the policy, personnel, and appointments. Back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Next up on the agenda is item number 8, finance. So I will pass it over to Finance Chair Furtado.
Would anybody object if I moved A and 2, 1 and 2 together? Seeing no objections. Budget Amendment 21-00014, Fund 850, Geographic Information Systems Joint Venture, Department 111, Operations and Administration, increased appropriations 27,900, increased revenue 27,903. Reason: amendment needed to cover the costs for acquisition of enhanced hydro brake lines and updated hydro flattened DEM for generation of countywide 1-foot contours from LiDAR data. CCGIS will be the administrative agent for this project. The expenditure to be paid with pass-through funds from the member agencies as reflected in the requested revenue increases. And 2, Budget Amendment 21-00015, Fund 107, Geographic Information Systems Fund, Department 010, the County Board, increased appropriations $5,475, increased revenue $0. Reason: LiDAR countywide contour layer to be procured by GIS Consortium with costs allocated to member agencies. Champaign County's cost is $10,950, with Highway paying 50% and GIS Fund paying 50% if approved by the board.
So
Do I have a motion? Mr. Store.
Yes, I'd like to move this combined motion.
That seems quite appropriate. Second?
Second. I'll second McGuire.
Mr. McGuire. I would mention that the reason that we are only coming for the GIS consortium's part of it is that the county highway fund does not need additional appropriations in order to make this expenditure. Mr. Storr, did you have a question?
No, I'd like to speak to the motion.
Please do.
Thank you. At the risk of putting some of the board members into a deep sleep, I'd like to point out that the importance of this LiDAR acquisition and the hydro flattening is so very important for us for many reasons, and especially in the rural and agricultural area, as we work to reduce the soil erosion and improve the stewardship of our agricultural lands. With the increasing adoption of precision farming techniques, including variable rate application and smart drainage and services as we try to feed a hungry world. This is the micro topography is very, very important. I argued in favor of increasing the point density for the acquisition. I consulted with colleagues, and they say that 4 points per square meter is adequate. It's above the minimum, but I urge approval of this measure. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Furtado.
Thank you, Dr. Starr. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, if the clerk would please call the roll.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
All right. Next up, we have the treasurer. That passes. The treasurer's report. The treasurer is here. If anybody has any questions of the treasurer. And seeing nothing, resolution authorizing the execution of a deed of conveyance of the county's interest or cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on real estate permanent parcel 14-03-35-427-011. Do I have a motion? Mary? Ms. King moved. Do I have a second? Brad, I saw Brad second.
Second.
Great. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, if the clerk could please call the roll.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Next up, we have just a discussion item about collecting interest on property tax payments. To some degree, this speaks to the issue that one of our public comments was making. And this is something that we thought about last year and did not take any action on. It's something that was brought to us by the treasurer. So I'm going to turn it over here in a second and let her speak to it. It's a conversation that county treasurers around the state have been having. And the question, and there's a very good memo that was put together about this that includes some language from last time when we considered this that was prepared for us by the state's attorney's office. So Jim and I and Kyle in our finance agenda setting meeting basically didn't feel that the three of us should decide this, that the board should actually have a chance to weigh in and let us know what your thoughts are on this issue because it's important for our constituents. And so the question is, do you as a body want us to prepare an agenda item for a more like an actual vote consideration around waiving part of the interest of property tax payments in response to the pandemic? So that's sort of the structure of what we wanted to have a conversation about. I guess I will ask if Treasurer Johnson wants to speak on it first, and then if any of the board members have any thoughts that they would like to share. Treasurer Johnson?
Yes. So this is just my attempt at providing options, because I know that last year, per conversations with my staff, last year, the commentary that was given was that the reason for things needing to go forward a certain way, I guess the pandemic was used as justification for continuation of certain things. And I know that there was a little bit of concern about doing this because it does mean a little bit more work on the treasurer's office. But I felt like it was my responsibility to let you guys know that that is an option that you guys have to provide to the community if you feel that it is warranted or necessary. Now, I will say there are definitely drawbacks because with suggesting that you remove interest, you run the risk of potentially having individuals, again, just not pay on time, and that will cause delays with distribution, specifically with the school district. But I do feel like it is definitely something for the board to at least speak about to see if that's something that can be justified. Now, as far as the amount of money, roughly $600,000 to $800,000 ends up being what we get as far as revenue from costs, penalties, and interest. It's a relatively small amount when you consider we're taking in close to 400 million. But again, if that's not something that you, again, feel inclined to do, this is like basically a bunch of money, almost $1 million that's going back to these communities, and it's not going to be, and of course, there are still going to be some individuals that will pay, will miss payment. We're still going to be collecting some penalties on this, whatever. But this is an option or opportunity to either delay, cancel, or whatever the case may be, some of the costs for this first payment. Now, we do have a significant number of individuals that are that their homes are mortgaged. So we get it from escrow companies, we get it from the different banks and things like that. So there is, and I said before, whatever, I can provide additional data on that if that's something that you want to fully consider this. But I do want to make sure that I'm at least letting you know that you do have these options available to you if you choose to use them.
Diane.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would actually be in favor of maybe extending the grace period. I'm not saying that we need to completely wipe everything out, but I would consider some kind of discussion about maybe extending our grace period. That gives people a little more time to see if their payments went through and whatnot. If there's a little snap in the system again, it allows us to be a little more compassionate because sometimes that's on our end, not just theirs. Once again, I don't want to completely waive everything. Certainly that can be done on a case-by-case basis, but we might just think about extending the grace period on both the first and the second.
So real quick, and then I'll call on Brad. I do want to mention that I did do some research on what counties did last year. There's not a lot of data about what they're doing this year. So just to kind of give you a landscape of that, almost in their entirety, they mostly, counties that did delayed just the first payment and not the second payment. Although St. Clair did delay the second payment by 1 month and Sangamon did by about half a month. They varied between a 1 month to 3 month grace period. So some delayed it by 30 days. And at the most that I saw, it was counties delayed it for 90 days up until the second payment was due. And in every single case that I saw, none of the counties included escrow payments in, like, as anybody whose taxes were going through a third party through escrow were not included in the grace period. And I will note that Lake County last year did consider this, but decided not to. And it seemed as if, from what I understand, that their reasoning was because of their concern about passing money on to the other taxing districts. And then the final thing I will say, some of them had a case by case issue, but most of them just blanket had that grace period, which does seem to be in a different set of opinion than what our state's attorney has given us, because they have like this 50% of the first payment thing that's like statutory in here, but I can't see that any of the other counties did that. It just was a grace period. So I do think that if we do want to move forward in the kind of way that Diane was speaking to, we might need to send this back to the state's attorney's office to give us some more guidance. Because I don't know what happened to all of these counties, you know what I'm saying, that did this, but several counties did last year. And it doesn't seem necessarily in harmony with the memo that we have. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's not to say that this memo is incorrect. I'm just saying that. And sorry. And then Diane, did you have a follow-up? And then I'll go to Brad.
I don't want to delay anything going to the schools or whatnot. Don't take that as my concern, because we do receive a large amount of money. I'd like to still make those disbursements. What I'm talking is about the people that are delinquent that may not be the bulk of the funds that we are receiving.
All right. Sorry, Brad. I just thought that might help structure the conversation a little bit. Brad.
No problem. Thank you, Stephanie. I have a problem with a blanket for everyone because, as mentioned, a lot of people will take advantage of that, not necessarily out of need, but out of choice. I wish there was some way that we could qualify someone for a grace period or an extension as opposed to a blanket statement, because for a multitude of other reasons, we had shortages and errors in the past. And I spoke to that before, not agreeing with extensions and so forth, just because so many people would take advantage of it that didn't necessarily need to. So I know June will be here before you know it, but I don't know if it could be an online form or an application or something that would at least prove need for extension. I would support something like that much more than just a blanket extension or forgiveness.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, did you have something to speak to on that?
Sure. Yes. So it's definitely within the board's authority to kind of have something set up as, I guess, an application of sorts for qualifying to have this pushed off. Realistically, Mr. Prasalakwa, again, this is just me saying, hey, you guys have the opportunity to make adjustments as you see fit. And I felt like I should say something about this because, again, last year there were, again, a lot of challenges, a lot of issues and things like that. And realistically, last year, the individuals in the office were not trained adequately for this system to handle what they were required to do. Now, realistically, I that's really all I wanted to say.
I will, just to echo what Mr. Prasalakwa said, DuPage County did that. You had to prove hardship. But I will say that in my estimation, and this is just my opinion, that our financial staff is stretched about as far as they could go right now as we go into the tax cycle, and as they, is particularly the treasurer's office are trying to backfill, 2 years of reconciliations. So I do think if we as the board do go down that path, we would have to have a serious conversation about how we resource that office in order to make sure that the other priorities that we have collectively for that office don't fall by the wayside because they're having to sort through those applications. So I do think that that needs to be part of the conversation if we do decide as a body to means test in some way, shape, or form, because I don't want us to be unrealistic about capacity. And I thought I saw Jen's hand.
Thank you. I actually was just going to ask Treasurer Johnson about the staffing capacity for an endeavor like that. And you kind of answered that question, Stephanie.
I mean, I don't want to speak for the treasurer, but that would be a concern that I would have as finance chair.
Treasurer Johnson, do you want to say anything more to that effect?
Sure, ma'am. So again, it depends on what the board determines is the right way to go forward. If it ends up being something where we're having to go through intense amounts of information, similar to what we do with senior deferrals and such, that process is pretty cumbersome. So if there is a request to actually say, hey, you have to provide information of hardship or information showing your hardship and such, there'd have to be a relatively seamless way to kind of do that. The possibilities could be an automated process, but that doesn't really touch at people that really have problems. And then what do we determine is the threshold for whether or not someone is considered truly having a hardship or not. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered before we can kind of move forward with it. If we are able to do some automated survey type deal online, that would be awesome. But at the same time, I worry about that and how many people will be eliminated just simply because they don't have a number that seems palatable.
Mr. Paslock.
Treasurer, do you have a feel for a percentage of how many tax bills are collected through escrow accounts from banks? Is it half and half or 75?
I would say a large majority are through escrow, but I don't know the actual number off the top of my head. But
Well,
again, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go finish.
I know that the chairman asked me about this whatever previously, and I said I can get that information if this moves past just having a conversation.
I mean, I would be inclined to think that if somebody's not making their house payment due to hardship, then obviously that those majority of people that are paying through escrow, it would probably be a lot simpler process to verify that, yeah, it's a hardship because we haven't had the note paid for since last March or something to that effect. So it could be that the amount of applications would be relatively small. And I don't expect you guys to have to decipher lots of data, but even a simple online form or maybe even if somebody falls into past due after 30 days, maybe it's a note card that says if you can prove your circumstances, then you won't have a late fee, as opposed to get it on the front side, maybe get it at the 30-day mark or something to that effect. But it would take some brain power and some communication, but I think we could get something that doesn't tax your office tremendously and get those people that need a helping hand some help, and then deter the people that just don't like to send us money.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So that is a possibility. We, again, because we're going back to the process of pushing out reminders and such via news release and different forums, that is definitely something that could be incorporated in that reminder that, hey, if you're able to like provide us something that shows these things in a certain way, we have the ability to waive. Now, again, that's an option. So if that would, and that seems like it would still allow for us to actually get the initial distribution out to the schools ahead of time so that they can do all their budgeting. And then if someone is having some serious problems, they can actually then say, hey, okay, let me tell you what's going on. via this automated process, as opposed to doing it from the very beginning. Again, these are good options, but again, I'm just trying to throw it out there so you guys can mull it over.
Well, I appreciate your input very much, and I think it's something we can work out. And I also have to tell you that I appreciate you not being in the news.
I appreciate it as well, sir. Thanks.
Mr. Storr.
Thank you. What we're talking about does not relieve anybody of paying their taxes. And if there's any benefit to keeping your money in the bank to collect the generous interest that we all receive from savings, I can't imagine that it would amount to very much. And when I calculated the percent, it's less than, it was like 0.1 per 5% of the tax revenue, has a penalty. It's very small, and I hate to burden the treasurer's office when you're working so hard to try to deal with so many years worth of back financial records to update.
Okay, so I mean, I guess the thing is this: if we are going to proceed, we need to, if we are going to decide to proceed to getting us to a place where we have something to vote on, we sort of need to decide that now, right? Like, do you want me, I don't know if maybe Diane, if you want to concretize a little bit, like what you're thinking about in terms of like, do you want me to bring back a 30-day or a 60-day means tested, do you want Jim and I to bring back a vote for finance later this month? Because I mean, that's what we would need to do if we're going to do it. Diane, and then I see Jacob.
Thank you, ma'am. I wouldn't mind just bouncing off some ideas with you.
Okay.
You can give me a call or a text, and we'll talk to each other, and you can tell me if I'm all wet, or maybe it'll be an aha moment for both of us, and just kind of go from there. And then you, as the chair of finance, and Goss as the deputy, as the assistant, then maybe come up with something with Ms. Johnson. I'm happy to do that, so we don't have to discuss all that here, and just give you a couple little ideas, and then you all decide from there.
Great, thank you, Jacob. Mr. Paul.
Yep. All right. I think that this could be definitely beneficial to a lot of people. I know there was been time where more kids that were in the home this year, where the money that would go to those schools on overages were spent in the house, and that's money that maybe should be tried to kept in the households, to where that's as use COVID as an excuse to help potentially more people. Because I think people want to pay their taxes, as crazy as that sounds, as a person who begrudgingly does. It's part of the system, and if you have kids, you understand. But I think if we can really save $1 million to the people who need it in our community, that's something we should look into.
Okay, I do want to caution us, because I do want to say that for almost across the board, it's usually only the first late payment and not the second late payment. So I don't want us to think that like we would recapture all of that money. I don't want us to be disappointed in that direction. Would it be okay with everyone if perhaps myself, Diane, Kyle, and Jim tried to put together a concrete proposal and obviously working with the treasurer's office in consultation with the state's attorney's office and Ms. Ogden, and bring something back to the board? Does that seem like a pathway forward? And if we just find out that it's just really unrealistic, we will let you know that as well. Okay. All right. So unless anybody
jumps in and says, stop, I'm going to move on. All right, so next up, we have the county executive approval of the creation of the Director of Operations position in salary grade range J and the concurrent elimination of the Director of Training position. We've talked about this quite a bit already. Does anybody have any other, do I have a motion?
So moved, Taylor.
Taylor, do I have a second?
I'll second, Lakshan.
Lakshan, any comments? Seeing none, if the clerk could please call the roll.
Goss,
No.
Harper,
No.
Humphrey, Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshan,
Yes.
McGuire,
No.
Michaels,
No.
Pasalakwa,
Present.
yes or no?
No.
Paul,
No.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
No.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. The next one is the financial forecast for the general corporate and public safety sales tax fund, which was distributed by email, and I will give the microphone over to Ms. Ogden. And I apologize, I skipped the auditor, and that was not intentional by any means, shape, or form. My eyes skipped it. Sorry, I took too many notes on my packet. So I'm going to go back up to that real fast. I apologize for that because it's important. The auditor is here. He gave us an update on the state of the audit, and I committed to this board that we would have this on the agenda from here on out until we're caught up with the audit. So thank you, George, for preparing the memo. I think you outlined where we are very well, but does anybody have any questions of George? I want to make sure that that you have that opportunity. I don't see any questions. George, do you have anything that you want to say?
No, if you read the memo, I'll just give an extemporaneous summary. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. McGuire does have a question. Why don't we let you speak and then we'll go to Mr. McGuire.
Okay, so the good news is we're off stop pay. The monies that were temporarily suspended in late March have been received by the grantees, and that's also the case today. So the money flows. The 3-month period that we were attempting to alleviate has been shrunk to 1 month, and the amount at stake is 1/6 of what we originally had. So rather than the 5.3 million, it's about 880,000. With an average, wait time for the reimbursements of only 2 extra weeks. So this seems, the good news is there will be no bond fees, no interest. I'm very pleased about that. And depending on their cash position on May 3rd, it may be the RPC doesn't even have to borrow from the county, but we talk every week.
Mr. McGuire.
Thank you. My question has to do with the issues that created some of the problems with the audit.
Sure.
Whether it's the clerk's office or the treasurer's office, where are we at correcting those issues so they don't become issues or you don't complete the audit by the time you suggest? I don't want to hear it again in next year, the same problems as we've had for 2 years. Thank you.
Well, we have we have a new treasurer and we have a new circuit clerk, and I think that they are very aware of their predecessors' contributions and have done a very good job. In fact, on my last,
I wasn't expecting a political attack. I wanted to know if the issues would be corrected and what you're doing to do them.
You see,
what is the clerk's office doing? What are you doing?
Why are you referring to the clerk? Are you referring to the county clerk?
No,
Jim,
I
I'm sorry.
misspoke. I meant the treasurer's office, but you can deflect if you like, but could you respond?
Jim, it sounds that you'd not be satisfied unless I said something that you preferred to hear, rather than what I'm honestly telling you. I don't foresee having delays from my departmental partners next year. My relationship with both CJ and Susan is very good. We have open communications, and I'm telling you, I sense from them a commitment to getting things that we need that I did not sense before. You may perceive that as an attack. I didn't name anybody. I didn't say her party. You know who I'm referring to. But the partisanship, I'm afraid, comes from your quarter. So I would counsel you to, word to the wise, be silent.
You didn't apologize.
To whom?
You didn't apologize. Don't point at me when you're the one that brought up the last few years and saying they were and insulting them.
I never insulted anybody. This is absolutely false. And by the way, Jim, in January, when I put up the audit timetable, I did so openly and transparently and with some trepidation. And nobody made any objections to what I was transparent in saying, that the audit would not come until June 1st. And I was the subject of attacks. Remember, you and Jim Goss and somebody else who was shrieking in the background called for my resignation. And you know what? I forgave you.
Thank you. I will say from my end, I basically am talking to the auditor, the treasurer, and the circle clerk's office every few days, and continually reiterating, so now that we have all of our 2019 audit materials to the external auditor, and we're turning to 2020, if there's any, if any of the offices see any potential delays, to let us know in an upstream kind of way, so that if we need to add additional resources, that will be available, as we clean up what happened in the circuit clerks and treasurer's office under prior officials. And I will also say that I am encouraged because George had set a date, I believe, of April 7th for them to get their materials for the 2019 audit. And both of them were able to get it to him what he needed earlier than that. So I do feel like that's a positive sign. But I am absolutely committed that this has to continue to be, to move in that direction. We do have a little bit of grace period because the feds have extended the 2020 audit date as well. But that said, everybody is very aware of the clock, and short of moving into their offices, I'm talking to them, and I will absolutely let you know if I see any red flags. But so far, it seems as if everybody's on the same page, moving forward, so that we can move forward in a positive direction going forward. And I thank all three of you for the work that you've done to get us there.
Thank you.
Okay, so apologize that I skipped around. If I do that in the future, just say, Stephanie, you can't read an agenda. Going back to the financial forecast for Tammy, and thank you, Tammy, for hanging out. And one of these days, we're gonna not have you be the last thing on the agenda.
Okay, let me try to get my screen up. Okay, good evening. I know it's getting late, so I will try to talk fast. Tonight's forecast is going to include the general fund, the public safety sales tax fund, and the capital asset replacement fund. So for future fiscal years, there are many variables that are unknown at this time. So this forecast is meant to provide a framework for financial decision making, and also to provide some direction as we begin the fiscal year 2022 budget process. One of the things I want to remind the board is of the county's financial rating. We have a AA2 rating, which is a very strong financial rating. I do anticipate that Moody's will be inquiring of the county once our fiscal year 2019 audit is completed. And I think that we are in a very favorable position to respond to them. A couple of things that they cited in our last rating were factors that could lead to an upgrade or growth in operating fund balance. And as you know, we did have that in fiscal year 2020. Also, sustained tax base expansion. And the county received an extension from the county clerk's office today, and total EAV increased by $143 million in tax year 2020. Moody's outlook for US local governments and for Illinois, however, are both negative. In the forecast for Illinois, Moody's did single out Champaign-Urbana and specifically stated that that community has navigated the crisis better than most. So that is very favorable for us. Regarding the economic conditions, I had mentioned to Ms. Furtado and Mr. Goss when we did agenda review that preparation of this forecast was much easier than last year. And I am happy to say that I do believe that the county weathered the pandemic in 2020 much better than was initially anticipated, although my forecast, as I said to you last year, was prepared on what I believe to be the worst case scenario. So for tax year 2021, which will be the fiscal year 2022 levy, the Illinois Department of Revenue has set the consumer price index at 1.4%, and that is down from 2.3%, which we are receiving in this fiscal year. So the CPI is the number that the county will be able to use for inflationary growth for its property tax levy. You can see here a picture of the University of Illinois Flash Index, and this does show strong growth in March. However, the state still remains below the dividing line between growth and expansion, which is the green line that's straight across. Just a couple of news and highlights. As you all know, that the county is going to be receiving over $40 million in American Rescue Plan Act. The forecast does not include any of that revenue, as it hasn't yet been determined how the county will utilize those funds. In fiscal year 2020, we did receive $1.3 million in CURE funding, which largely went to the general fund, with the exception of about $64,000 that went to the Capital Asset Replacement Fund. We are in the midst of ERP implementation, and go live has been pushed off. I can't remember if the board had been updated about that yet, but go live for financials is now set for September, and for human resources in October, and budget go live remains in January of 2022. Regarding the hospital property tax exemption cases, the county was required to refund about $1.5 million in fiscal year 2020 and has appealed that decision. I just want to take this opportunity to remind the board that a loss of that appeal could result in the county paying additional refund for tax year 2004 and potentially prejudgment interest. There are also 2 other cases that are outstanding, and the county does not have reserve funds for any of this outstanding potential liability. Criminal justice reform legislation that was recently approved in Illinois is expected to have a measurable impact on county finances. I have spoken with Sheriff Harmon, and he has provided some preliminary estimates of what he believes he will need to ask for during the fiscal year 2022 budget process in order to comply with this legislation. And coupled with the anticipation that we will experience increased costs, we will also experience revenue declines. And that is associated with the elimination of certain fees and fines and the elimination of monetary bail, which is expected to take place into 2023. So I'm a broken record every year when we talk about the financial challenges that the county faces. One of the largest challenges that we face is legislative and administrative decisions made by the state that continue to impact county revenues. As you know, for several years, the state garnished part of our income tax revenues. In July of 2020, that was discontinued. However, Governor Pritzker in his state fiscal year 2022 budget address did propose re-implementation of that 10% cut. Personal property replacement tax revenues, diversions continue to increase, and the more funds that are diverted by the state, the less funds that are distributed to local governments. The state collection fee continues to take revenues from the county related to our public safety sales tax revenues. And one of the other things that the county has experienced year over year up until 2020 is declines in our funding from the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, which reimburses a portion of our juvenile detention and court services personnel costs. One of the things that we talk about just very briefly on an annual basis is legislation that proposes property tax reform. There has not been successful legislation passed. However, there are, once again, several bills proposed at the state level, and many of them include reductions and or freezes to property tax extensions. So the county's property tax levy is already limited to increases under the property tax extension limitation law, which we often refer to as PTEL. And I just want to bring to the board's attention that additional limitations that are imposed by legislation would jeopardize one of the county's largest and most stable revenue sources, and that is our property taxes. One of the things that the state did do for the county that was favorable in fiscal year 2021 is implementation of level the playing field legislation. This was effective on January 1st of this year, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about the sales taxes. I'm going to back up. I only talked about the state. Didn't talk about some of the other county issues. And one of those is infrastructure issues. You can see there's an aerial view here. This was recently taken by drone during the review of the county's rooftops. Mr. Brenner provided this picture. But infrastructure throughout the county is being addressed through the county's 10-year capital plan, which was approved in 2018 and recently revised at the end of 2020. However, that plan does not include anything for the downtown correctional center and sheriff's office. And just as a reminder, the 2015 facilities condition report that was provided by Bailey Edwards categorized the facility as poor. And over the last 6 years, the facility has only continued to deteriorate further. So I think Mr. Storer mentioned this earlier tonight, but it is absolutely essential that the county resume discussions regarding a plan for that facility. Technology is another thing that the county has been trying to strategically invest in. As you know, the ERP is underway this year. There's also the area-wide records management system that is being replaced this year as a joint project. And excuse me, in fiscal year 2021, we did end up deferring some of the things that were scheduled for replacement on the IT plan. Some of those projects were partially funded in capital asset replacement fund. There is some reserve funding, but they have not yet been fully funded. And one of the largest things that is scheduled for replacement in fiscal year 2022 is the justice case management system. And a funding source has not been identified for that system either. Health insurance cost is another thing that the county sees increases in year over year. The increase and the premium for the current year is 7%, and 7.5% of total general corporate fund expenditures are for employee health insurance. And one other thing of note is one of the issues that the county faces is employee recruitment and retention. This does have a financial impact on the county, as well as there are productivity costs associated with turnover. So starting with the general fund, property taxes make up about 36% of total general corporate fund revenues. And as I stated earlier, are the one of the largest and most stable revenue sources that the county has. The county is relying on consistent growth in property tax revenues that is allowed by the inflationary increase set by the CPI that I mentioned earlier, and also new property that is added to the tax rolls. You can see in fiscal year 2020 that there was an actual decline compared to fiscal year 2019, and that is a result of the Carl ruling that I referenced earlier. The county actually did collect those property taxes, but with the advice of the outside auditor, those were treated as a revenue. When it was recorded on the financials, it was treated as a revenue reduction, and that's why you see this decrease reflected in fiscal year 2020. In fiscal year 2021, the county reallocated the former nursing home operating levy to the general fund in order to eliminate the $1 million loan that was on the balance sheet. And so there is an increase associated with that reflected here. And that reallocation is not carried through in the general fund for future fiscal years because it's not yet been determined how we will be reallocating that former levy line. In fiscal year 2023, it is expected that the county will be able to add about $94,000 in additional property tax revenue associated with the solar farm and in rural Sydney that is set to begin construction in 2022. State shared revenues make up 38% of the general corporate fund total revenue, and sales taxes took a pretty significant hit in fiscal year 2020, obviously as a result of the pandemic. The quarter-cent sales tax revenue reflected a decline of 7.3% compared to fiscal year 19, and the county's 1 cent sales tax, even with the inclusion of the new cannabis sales tax that was not budgeted, still experienced a 5% decline in that revenue line. So the good news is that the county has received April disbursements, which were for January collections. And as I mentioned earlier, the level of the playing field legislation was effective in January. It wasn't known exactly what kind of impact this was going to have on county revenues, especially combined with the ongoing impact of the pandemic. So, we were very conservative in our fiscal year 2021 revenue budgets, but for the January collection, April distribution, the quarter-cent sales tax numbers were up 13.6% over the prior year month. And the 1 cent sales tax revenue were up 46% over the prior year month. So that's good news for the county. Use tax revenues have consistently performed very strong, largely related to growth in e-commerce sales. However, the level of playing field legislation is expected to negatively impact use tax because some of those taxes that were being collected as use tax are now being collected as sales tax. The Illinois Municipal League actually projects that revenues could fall between 25 and 50%. However, there's not really any data to support that yet. So at this time, my projections are going to be that use tax will come in as budgeted, and I will just monitor that as we begin to receive those revenues. For income tax, it continues to outperform economist projections and the county's budget. For this fiscal year, the Illinois Municipal League estimated in September of 2020 that income tax would be $92 per capita for the calendar year. That is the number that we used for our budget. Currently, IML is estimating that income taxes will be $112 per capita. So that is a significant increase from the initial projections and could result in as much as $645,000 in additional revenue for the county in fiscal year 2021. Wages, as I think I mentioned when we did the 2020 wrap up, fell less than expected, and jobs that were lost were actually in lower paying service jobs. And those are a couple of the factors that are playing into that. Personal property replacement tax is a smaller revenue line, but I really just wanted to show the board here that this is one of those revenue streams that is extremely difficult to budget and forecast. And that is largely because the state just keeps messing with it. The personal property replacement tax revenues are based on economic factors, but the state also makes transfers to the refund fund, and the state, as I stated earlier, continues to increase their diversions from this fund before distributing it. So for 2021, I'm trying to remember if I have those. I think I might have had them in an earlier reference. The the diversions are $312 million compared to $21.6 million in 2009. So again, an extremely difficult revenue to budget and forecast. Fiscal year 2020 was very close to budgeted revenues, but 2021, it is expected that revenues will exceed the budget numbers. And I will say that the state is the one who provides us with those budget numbers. State reimbursement I referenced earlier. This is largely from the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts. And we have seen annual fluctuations in this revenue. We experienced 4 straight years of funding cuts from AOIC prior to fiscal year 2020, when we started receiving what they consider to be full allocation. But one of the biggest things that makes it difficult to budget and forecast for state reimbursement is that the reimbursement is delayed anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And, you know, we often at the end of the year, depending on what we have or have not received, this can significantly impact budget numbers. For expenditures, personnel costs make up 67% of total general fund expenditures. And you can see here wages and health and life insurance compared to total expenditures. In summary, for the general fund, fiscal year 2020, which is not yet audited, but still expected to have a significant surplus, largely related to cure funding and also underspending. Fiscal year 2021, we're still fairly early in the year, but it is anticipated that there will be a budget surplus. It could be as much as $1.5 million. And that is predominantly related to anticipated underspending in the personnel and services categories. You, Mr. Storer, referenced the vacancies list earlier. The county does have a lot of turnover, and that ends up generating underspending in personnel costs. And also expected performance in revenues that is better than budgeted, and that predominantly is related to the state shared revenue categories, particularly income taxes. For future fiscal years, a couple things I just want to point out. This is just a new kind of calculation that I took a few minutes to look at this year. What the expenditure growth is related to inflation versus the county's revenue growth. And I estimate that as much as 91% of the county's expenditures grow with inflation, while only about 72% of our revenues increase with inflation. In fiscal year 2022, you can see here that is expected that the budget will be fairly balanced, but then moving forward in future fiscal years, a structural imbalance starts to emerge. And one of the things that the county, I want to make sure that the board understands, is that when the county prepares its budgets, as I stated earlier, that personnel costs make up 67% of our total expenditures. When we do the personnel budgeting, we are budgeting for full personnel wages. However, we don't often end up spending all of those costs because of our turnover. So this forecast does include budgeting for full personnel cost, which the county has always done. And I would like to potentially explore, as we do the fiscal year 2022 budget process, the potential for us to maybe look at departments that are larger and have more turnover, perhaps funding them at a slightly lower level, giving the county capacity to utilize revenues for other sources, rather than having to come up with a balanced budget every year where we know we're going to be underspending personnel. So I just want to put that out there as food for thought as we move into the 2022 budget process. Moving to public safety sales tax fund. In fiscal year 2021, 49% of public safety sales tax revenues go to pay the county's debt service. And you can see that reflected here by this bottom category. Revenues for public safety sales tax were down 9% in fiscal year 2020, obviously related to the pandemic. And this forecast assumes that revenues will be fully restored in fiscal year 2021, and that there will be nominal but sustained growth in future fiscal years. In 2027, actually the end of 2026, the county will mature its 2016 bond issue. You can see there's a little bit of capacity here between revenues and expenditures. And at the end of fiscal year 2028, we will have retired all of our public safety sales tax debt. And again, you can see that increased capacity reflected in fiscal year 2029. These are the projected available funds in the public safety sales tax fund in future fiscal years. Excuse me. And these are potential funds that would be available to address some of the needs and financial challenges, and also potentially the increased cost of legislative changes related to the criminal justice reform legislation that I mentioned earlier. The capital asset replacement fund is the last fund I'm going to cover tonight. The capital asset replacement fund is largely supported by the general fund and also supported by public safety sales tax fund. The county has been using its 10-year capital facility plan and also its more recently implemented IT plan to help guide some of its decisions as it begins to increase investments in both its facilities and technology. So the capital asset replacement fund forecast, however, does not include reserve funding for future fiscal years. The county has not been able to do that, with the exception of 2019. We really only have the capacity for current only funding, and we haven't been able to set aside much reserve for future fiscal years, with a few exceptions. It does not include funding for addressing the downtown correctional center and sheriff's office. And it does not include funding for the projects on the next slide that I'm going to point out that are on the plan, with the exception of a couple of projects that we have some reserve funding in capital asset replacement fund. So in fiscal year 2021, per the plan, these items that you can see in the first column have not yet been initiated, and those are network upgrades and phone system upgrade, which we do have some partial funding for, animal control shelter, court audio system, video hearing arraignment, and video evidence management. We do have some partial funding for both the video hearing and the video evidence management systems. In 2022, as I mentioned earlier, the Justice Case Management System is scheduled for replacement. Per the IT plan, that could cost as much as $15 million, and a funding source for that has not yet been identified. Just in summary, a couple of things I want to point out. As I mentioned earlier, the county will be receiving a significant amount of ARPA funding, and as a county board determines how it will utilize that funding, it would be advisable to keep in mind the facility and technology needs of the county, and consider eligible funding to address some of those issues. Also, for fiscal year 2022, I just want to kick off some discussions about levy reallocation. My initial recommendation for that would be to finish making the Social Security Fund whole. That would require about $232,000. Finish making the IMRF Fund whole, and that would be about $183,000, with the remaining balance of the levy going towards the obligation still owed to self-funded insurance. Next month, the county executive will be providing information for the fiscal year 2022 budget process, and that will be followed in June by meetings with department heads and elected officials, giving budget instructions, and in July with meetings for department heads and elected officials to begin developing the 2022 budget. And that is all I have, Ms. Furtado.
Thank you so much. That was super helpful. I had some questions, but I'm just going to ask them offline. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see anybody's hands. So moving on, other business. I don't have any. Chair's report. I don't have one except for to say that on April 27th, we are going to have our first study session about the ARP funding. I know, especially for some of you, it's planning season. So if you can't attend, but you would like to make sure that your voice is heard and that you're part of the conversation, I'd be glad to meet with you at some other time. So if you can't make that meeting, just please let me know if you have thoughts, because I do want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. And with that, budget, what I have for the consent agenda is A1 and 2 and B2. And I give it back to Mr. Patterson.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is item 9, Justice and Social Services. Chair Taylor.
Justice and Social Services, item A, we have the monthly reports have been put on the webpage. The Rosecrans Reentry Financial Report is for February 2021. That is information only. Item C, other business, is the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. You all should have gotten that in your email from Megan the other day. Unless I hear an objection, I would like to, or I should say, unless somebody thinks we need to move into closed session, I would just like to make the motion or to move these into what the state's attorney's office has decided they need to be. I don't see any objections. Is there a motion to move the minutes suggested by the state's attorney's office from closed to open and maintain all the other minutes as closed? Can I get a motion?
So moved, Humphrey.
Second.
Thank you, Jordan and Eric. Is there any, we can't really discuss this right now, so I'm going to skip that, but it's habit. Megan, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Goss,
Yes.
Harper, Harper,
I think he left the meeting.
thank you. Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pasalakwa,
Yes.
Paul,
I think he's gone as well.
thank you. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Store,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Wolken,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you all. I do not have a chair's report. I'm assuming this has to be, item C1 has to be placed on the consent agenda. So that is all I have. Back to you, Chair Patterson.
All right, thanks. And we have other business. And for other business, Chris Storr is going to talk about LiDAR for the next 45 minutes. I'm kidding. Seeing no other business, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
That was funny time.
Yeah.